Corruption is huge. It's the #1 problem in Ukraine. It's kind of a cancer or a tumor we have inside the country.
Ukraine is a classical mafia state. There is almost no space beyond corruption. It's all filled by corruption.
Qui descrivono omicidi particolarmente cruenti, cioè ho picchiato la testa fino a romperla, l'ho ucciso con molti colpi.
Have you been using London to launder dirty money? Mr. Truhanov.
It's very easy to get dirty money into the UK if you have the right connections.
We are complicit because we are helping them steal public money. We are providing the getaway vehicle. We are providing the safe haven within which they can hide it.
We've become the money laundering capital of the world, and our reputation has been damaged by it.
I've just been knocked over. Someone kicked me in the groin.
This is a story of how gangsters' dirty money ends up in Britain. But it starts in Ukraine, at the home of the former president. It's now a museum, a symbol of corruption.
When people first came here, they were really surprised. They saw all the luxury that was built for their own money, for the money stolen by the president.
It's been described as the most expensive log cabin in the world, paid for with money stolen from the state by Viktor Yanukovych.
It's limited edition. If you look attentively, you will find the picture of John Lennon.
The corrupt president may have gone, but this country's problems didn't end when he left. It's estimated that Ukraine is still losing around $2 billion a year to corruption.
Under pressure from the West, Ukraine has set up a National Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU for short. It's confronting the corrupt elite who are exploiting the country.
You might think white-collar crime is just a matter of bankers, money transfers. This is how seriously they take white-collar crime in Ukraine.
And they need the target practice. Here's what happened when NABU visited the home of a judge suspected of corruption.
Давайте решим вопрос, пожалуйста. Все ушли, это нападение. Мы сотрудники антикоррупционного бюро.
NABU is the first law enforcement body that started large-scale investigations into people in authority.
NABU has caught some officials suspected of corruption, but most of the stolen money disappears overseas.
Unfortunately, it's not just a Ukrainian problem, it's a global problem. It's clear that all big corruption schemes that we are investigating in Ukraine are connected to offshore accounts.
Many of the offshore companies involved in Ukrainian corruption are linked to Britain. It's part of a wider problem. Every year, billions of pounds of corrupt money goes through the UK. It's become a big political issue.
We've become the money laundering capital of the world, and our reputation has been damaged by it. There's been too many examples over years of how we've seen dirty money coming into the city, and by allowing this to happen, we're almost aiding and abetting these criminals get away with their ill-gotten goods.
those trying to clean up Ukraine say it's our problem too. The former governor of Odessa, Mikhail Saakashvili, was leading the fight against corruption. But he was arrested on what his supporters say were trumped-up charges. They helped him escape.
Watch out for the bikes.
Don't get knocked by.
But he's been forced to leave the country.
Nice to meet you, Andy Verity.
Very nice to meet you.
He says the West has to stop the flow of dirty money.
Every time that I hear from Westerners, when I was governor of Odessa, I would go to Vienna or London and they would tell me, you have problems with corruption. And we are hurt by it. Excuse me, if you're hurt by it, do something about it. All their money is in London, in Vienna, do something about it. Why you complain to me? You could have shut up the whole thing within days, within weeks, if you had wanted to.
The British government says it is cracking down on money laundering. But we've uncovered a case that shows how serious the problem is. A violent mafia gang stashing its cash in London. It involves a leading politician in the south of Ukraine, the mayor of Odessa. Gennady Trakhanov is a public official who's proud of his tough guy image. He's the president of the Ukrainian Thai Boxing Federation.
Город.
This is how he sells Odessa to the outside world.
Город – это их дом и
You wouldn't think it had a corruption problem if you listen to the mayor.
тех, кто рядом с вами. Творите добрые дела и верьте, все случится. С Новым годом!
Вознякова Анна, включите микрофон.
But he was publicly challenged in the council chamber about a suspicious property deal.
На предмет законности, потому что данная юридическая компания Development Elite носит все признаки фиктивного предприятия.
The mayor is suspected of having links to a company that sold this abandoned site to Odessa Council. Anna Pozniakova says the council paid £3 million too much for the land. She says the plan was to move the money out of the country with the help of a British company.
It's money that could be spent on social projects, on schools or nurseries. It could be spent to repair roads. In fact, it's money that could do good for all Odessa citizens.
The mayor is also under investigation for alleged corruption on deals involving Odessa's roads and airport. When he appeared in court 2 months ago, there were violent protests. Shots were fired, and a man attacked the judge's car with an axe. Mr. Trakhanov denies all the accusations and is still in his job as the city's mayor.
Я хотел как можно быстрее ответить полно на все вопросы, для того, чтобы объяснить наконец-то обществу, в том числе и тем, кто ведет это судебное расследование, что моей вины там нет, нет моей вины, там абсолютно нет моей вины.
But we've seen evidence that Gennady Trakhanov has links with organized crime, going back decades. In the late 1990s, the Italian police investigated a crime gang from Odessa suspected of selling weapons and drugs. They spent 4 years tracking their movements across Europe.
As part of our investigation, we intercepted several telephone conversations which revealed how dangerous and violent this group was. They described murders that were particularly cruel. I kept hitting his head till it broke. I killed him with many blows. He didn't want to die, but I hit him many times. They were extremely violent.
The Italian police identified one member of the crime gang with responsibility for security. He trained new recruits how to fight. His name? Gennady Trukhanov.
Trukhanov Gennady, alias Genia.
Trukhanov Gennady, alias Genia, used to live in Italy, in a posh neighborhood in Rome. He was in charge of training the soldiers in self-defense techniques, hand-to-hand combat and sniper shooting with high-precision weapons.
The Italian police discovered Mr. Trukhanov worked closely with a gang boss, Alexander Angert, aka the Don of Odessa. Police have told us he has a previous conviction for murder.
He was the boss of a criminal society which operated in Odessa and was particularly active in the corruption of local politicians.
You won't find many investigators of organised crime more expert than the Italian police here in Rome. But there was a problem. The evidence that they'd accumulated wasn't evidence of crimes being committed here in Italy. So the prosecutor told them they couldn't go ahead.
The mayor and the Don of Odessa were never charged. But police found out the gang had links to another European city. London is one of the biggest financial markets in the world. That's one reason it attracts an estimated £90 billion of dirty money each year.
The fact is, corrupt individuals cannot steal public funds unless they have a getaway vehicle and then a safe place to stash their stolen loot, right? And anonymous companies are the getaway vehicle, and UK assets such as property are the safe haven, the place where they hide their funds.
London property is a good place to hide dodgy cash. It's seen as a safe investment, and there are few checks. Transparency International says there are 40,000 properties where the identity of the owner is hidden.
Not even the land registry knows who owns these homes. And money laundering of suspicious funds is a huge problem. You know, we found £4.2 billion worth of property in London alone that is owned by people with suspicious wealth. Most of the properties are within 3 miles of Buckingham Palace, so Kensington and Chelsea really is at the heart of where dirty money is stashed in the UK.
And Kensington and Chelsea is one place where we think the Ukrainian crime gang has hidden money. Alexander Angert, the Don of Odessa, bought a flat in this historic block in 1996 and sold it a few years later.
You won't find Alexander Angert's name on public records about who owns the flat in this block. That's because he didn't buy it like you or me. It was bought through an offshore company. And that means the identity of the person who owns it is kept secret.
It is legal to own property through offshore companies, but they can be used by criminals to cover their tracks.
The use of shell companies for money laundering purposes is a problem not just in Britain, but is a problem worldwide. There are a whole series of structures here which are used by criminals and politically exposed people internationally to hide their control of assets.
It used to be almost impossible to find out who owned an offshore company. But now, that wall of secrecy has been breached.
Good evening. We start tonight with new revelations from millions of leaked documents known as the Paradise Papers, which show how some corporations and individuals try to
An unnamed source obtained 6 million documents from the computer system of the offshore firm Appleby. The Paradise Papers revealed how the rich and powerful use tax havens. Now, working with the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, we found evidence of criminals using them.
We've been digging further into the Paradise Papers, and we've uncovered a network of companies linked to the gangsters in Odessa. So David, I'm keen to see what you have to say about this stuff. We've been amazed by what we found here.
We have shown the documents to several experts on money laundering.
We found out that an infamous criminal gang were able to use the British offshore system to bring millions of pounds worth of money here and buy assets. How significant is that?
It's very significant because it shows an example, perhaps for the first time I've seen such detail, of just how simple this cycle works.
What would you do with this as an investigator? What can you say about to what extent this evidence suggests money laundering?
Well, I'm hugely suspicious. To me, it fits all the hallmarks of money laundering.
Our documents show how the gangsters used a London accountant, Alexander Popivka. His firm set up and ran offshore companies with Appleby's help. It was his responsibility to conduct crucial money laundering checks. Checks designed to keep dirty money out.
He is what's called an eligible introducer because he had passed certain exams, he was member of a particular professional body which had anti-money laundering standards. He has a status which allows him to identify customers and to bring them to Appleby, and critically bring them to Appleby with his seal of approval, with him basically saying, I've done the checks.
It was legal for Appleby to leave the checks to the accountant. For the system to work, Mr. Popivka has to be thorough and independent. But we have discovered he's related to a leading member of the crime gang. Mr. Popivka is married to the Don of Odessa's sister. And Mr. Popivka's work actually helped the criminal gang to run dozens of offshore companies.
These are the smart suits who are sitting there in their nice offices, drawing up contracts, creating companies, creating shareholder structures, and then moving money around the world while they drink their latte. And we're talking about billions of pounds. That's not the kind of money that can be carried in suitcases and canvas bags. That has to be moved through these professionals.
We found 3 apartments linked to gang members in this exclusive block overlooking Chelsea Harbour. A couple of miles away is one of the world's most expensive streets. You have to be rich to live at 199 Knightsbridge. And the gang was linked to 3 flats here. 2 were sold to a woman with no obvious source of independent wealth. The purchase price for just one of the flats was £12.5 million. The buyer had a familiar surname. She's Anya Angert, the Don of Odessa's daughter. She's also bought a 3rd flat in the same block.
So the material that you've shown me certainly gives me cause for suspicion, would give law enforcement cause for suspicion that there is money laundering taking place. What we need to do in these circumstances is to be able to be clear How much of that material is capable of being used in court as evidence as it stands? There is nothing in principle stopping us from going after civil recovery of that property.
We have discovered that the mayor of Odessa also had 4 secret offshore companies. Politicians like Mr. Trukhanov are supposed to be subjected to the strictest financial checks. But once again, those checks were left to the accountant. The documents from the Paradise Papers clearly show Mr. Popivka had dealings with the mayor. But when we phone the accountant, he denies it.
Have you ever had any business dealings with Hennady Trukhanov?
No.
None at all?
No.
And do you have any personal relationship with him at all?
I've seen him. We shook hands when I was visiting Odessa, but that was the extent of it. There was never anything that I could help him with, nor did he ever ask.
Have you ever had any dealings with companies linked to Hennady Trukhanov?
Here's what I would suggest for us to do. First of all...
That's just a yes or no question.
Hold on.
I just want to ask you whether you know Hennady Trukhanov personally and whether you've had any business dealings.
I know of him, and I've never dealt with him in any capacity.
Mr. Popivka denies all our allegations. He later told us that at no time has there ever been any doubt as to the legitimacy or legality of his client's integrity, activities, source of their funds, or the nature of proposed transactions. Appleby told us it had acted lawfully and complied fully with all applicable laws, regulations, and policies. It says it was entitled to rely on Mr. Popivka's confirmation that he had conducted due diligence, and the firm stopped using eligible introducers in 2015. Appleby says the documents were stolen from them, so it's unlawful for us to use them. But the Paradise Papers strongly indicate that offshore companies administered by Mr. Popivka and Appleby were used by the criminal gang to launder money. It went on for 10 years, and they both failed to stop it.
The gatekeepers are our first line of defence here, not law enforcement. That's much later, could be years after. It's too late then. The gatekeeper is the first line of defence.
This is a promotional video for another exclusive development in London. An apartment here was bought for nearly £4 million by an offshore company. Our documents show that offshore company was owned by the mayor of Odessa's family in 2015. But Mr. Popivka told us that when it bought the flat in 2016, the company was owned by someone else. We don't know who that owner is. But we've seen this woman regularly using the flat. It's Anya Angat again, the daughter of the Don of Odessa. It suggests the flat is linked to the organised crime gang.
What makes it suspicious?
The fact that somebody is under investigation for corruption, that you then have people who are directly and closely linked to that individual, and then you see a structure through an offshore territory, owning property, high-value property in London, and there is no obvious source of income linked to that would be legitimate. It's the package that makes it suspicious.
Back in Ukraine, we have been trying to catch up with the mayor. He's refused to grant us an interview. We found out he was attending a ceremony with Odessa's Greek community. It's risky because Mr. Trakhanov has friends here. But it's my only chance to question the suspected mobster.
Mr. Trakhanov, do you have secret investments overseas? BBC Panorama, do you have secret investments overseas? Mr. Trakhanov, you've been accused of corruption. Have you been using London to launder dirty money? Mr. Trakhanov, have you been using London to launder dirty money? Mr. Trakhanov, are you corrupt? You talk to us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mister!
Today is a national day.
Mr. Trakhanov,
Today is a national day.
he's agreed to speak to us.
Nobody.
Mr. Trakhanov, Cheve Korumpovaný. Cheve Korumpovaný. BBC, Cheve Korumpovaný. I've just been knocked over. Someone kicked me in the groin. Mr. Trakhanov, why won't you talk to us? He's shouting at me. I'm a journalist from an international news organisation.
Mr. Trakhanov later told us he denied all our allegations and that the false information we are putting out undermines his honour, dignity and reputation.
Well, that was a lot of aggravation, let me put it that way. I was asking a question, which is a very important question about breaking international laws. The response was to hustle me out of the place and kick me in the groin, and now to try to shut our cameras down. Do you have freedom of the press in Ukraine, sir? Freedom of the press?
The British government says it's determined to stop money laundering. It's promised to identify the foreign owners of UK property. And police have new powers to seize homes bought with suspicious cash.
The UK has very strong regulations on money laundering. It has powers now to go after the kind of assets that we're talking about. Is it perfect? No. But it is actually a pretty strong system.
But our investigation shows how easy it was for the Ukrainian mafia to hide cash in London.
It's deeply worrying. A number of us have been warning of this, that it reflects on the lack of regulation of a financial sector that's happened over years.
Those suffering from corruption say the West must do more.
The Western government should practice what they preach. First they tell us, oh great, go and fight with corruption. And then when we really take this call seriously and we do it, they keep abandoning us. To me, it's deeply hypocritical.
We've exposed a British system that's been wide open to dirty money. A system that helps criminals to profit from their crimes.
Terry suffered from a severe stroke. Now it's time to get him home. DIY SOS, The Big Build, is next on BBC One. Crossing a lock and facing the ladder climb, our students are dropped into the remote Scottish Highlands. Secret Agent Selection on BBC Two now.
Patient breathing. Doesn't know what's going on. Can you send someone quick?
It's had a fall at home. She's stuck in the car. The car's turned over.
We've already panicking.
They've been stabbed with a knife. There's a lot of blood.
Please pull me out.
The stories behind the sirens.
Bring the noise.
Ambulance starts Thursday at 9 on BBC One.
It can be a bit challenging when we've got a child that's medically stable and the only thing that's stopping them going home is that they haven't got a suitable house.
The touch and go from when he was born.
The final day we get him home, it'll feel like we've made it then.
The award-winning series Hospital continues tomorrow at 9 on BBC Two.
Coming up at 10, a new addition to the royal family. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have a baby boy. And all Caribbean migrants who are members of the Windrush generation will be granted British citizenship if they want it. For that and the day's other news, join us at 10.
Change your plan. We are conquering Hell Valley via Striding Edge.
No, actually, I think that's upside down.
See you at the top, though. Hi, we'll be waiting for you.
Mum, I'm starving.
What's all this?
Grandma?
And where the hell's my son?
I don't want to worry you, but,
They're still on the mountain!
Can't tell the difference between a berry and a rabbit dropping.
You're the one who ate it.
Home from Home continues Friday at 9:30 on BBC One.
So the latest on our new royal baby in an hour on BBC One. Right now, and